Hi everyone, Dan Mullen from the Hollywood Corner. So glad to be back for this special one-night podcast event. And I want to say a big thanks to my very special guest who you're going to hear from in just a few minutes, and that is Gary King, indie filmmaker, writer, director, producer, talking about his new movie that's coming out on August 8th called Among Us. It's a horror thriller. You can catch it on all cable providers. You can also pre-order it right now on iTunes. And also, you can buy it on DVD and Blu-ray from Amazon.com. So be sure to check it out. Really great guy. The movie looks amazing. Following this podcast, we're going to put up the trailer for the film. So be sure to stay tuned following this podcast for an exclusive look at the upcoming film Among Us by tonight's special guest, Gary King. I also want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, comicbento.com. They've been with us from the very beginning, and they sponsored the very first edition of the Hollywood Corner. So thank you so much for Comic Bento. Check them out for as low as $20 a month. You can get up to $40 worth of comics delivered to your door. And some of those comics come from the biggest names in the industry. Marvel, DC, Image, Boom, Dark Horse. Plus some independents that you never even heard about, but sometimes to me, on my Comic Bento, those are some of the books I look forward to the most. So check them out, comicbento.com. They're great. For as low as $20 a month, you can get $40 worth of comics delivered to your door. You can't beat it. You just can't beat it. So a big thanks to Comic Bento for sponsoring tonight's edition of a very special return of the Hollywood Corner. So without further ado, let's get into the interview with director, producer, writer, really all-around great guy. Please welcome to the Hollywood Corner, Mr. Gary King. I want to start things off by saying I finished watching How Do You Write a Joe Sherman Song?
Yes, the long title.
Blew me away, dude.
Nice.
Blew me away. Absolutely amazing. I really liked the girl who played Evie.
Awesome. Yeah.
I thought she had a phenomenal voice, and I got a kick out of you being in it as a director. that was trippy. I was like, oh, he's pulling a Stan Lee, you know. So that was really cool. But I mean, everything about that show, that movie was great. Like it was, to me, it was exactly what I wanted it to be. So.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks for watching it.
Yeah, so tell me, what made you want to write that type of movie?
It was something that had been brewing in me for the longest time, because just growing up as a kid, my parents showed me all types of movies, not just taking me to the theaters, but once, the video rental market boom happened and VHS, I'm aging myself here, but when VHS took over, they started renting stuff that they wanted to show me stuff that they grew up on. So they started showing me My Fair Lady, Music Man, Singing in the Rain, like all these old classic stuff. And then growing older, I discovered Once and All That Jazz and other musicals, even Chicago that came out, and just saw how much fun it was to blend song and dance into a narrative, and you can do it effectively for modern audiences, so it doesn't seem like, because you get that feedback a lot, like, oh, I hate musicals because they stop and sing and dance all the time out of nowhere.
Right.
And I wanted to take that on and take that challenge and say, well, I think I can do something where there's that balance of the fantastical, have some Broadway melodies, and still have audiences enjoy it, even if they don't even like musicals. And that was the best part of the touring the festival circuit. I had so many people just tell me, I usually don't like musicals, but I like your film, or I loved your film. So that was fun.
Yeah, so what I also found interesting was, and I didn't know this even when you and I were talking in Belize, was the main character is the real main character.
Yeah.
So how did that partnership start? Because I noticed he wrote all the songs and lyrics. Was that you two combining efforts, going, hey, I want a song like this?
It was all his lyrics, but in the script I had placeholders of where I wanted the songs to happen. So I gave him the script, and it would say song 1 or song 2, and narratively it would show where it would happen. And from that, I discussed with him the thematics or what I wanted the song to be about, but he's the genius. Like, he's the one that has all the talent in terms of creating wonderful melodies, and those lyrics are just so awesome. And that was how I discovered him. Actually, was through a mutual friend, Mark DeConza, who played Gunther, the casting director friend in the movie. He introduced me to Joe through his songs, and I had already thought that Joe was an established songwriter, and when I found out that he wasn't, I was like, dude, I want to. This is the stuff I've been waiting for. Like, I wanted to make a musical, I just didn't have the songs, and so this was the guy that, as soon as I met him, heard his music, I knew that's my next project. I have the songs now.
Yeah, no, he was great. Christina Rose, who plays his girlfriend, was really, really good. And then you mentioned Mark's name, who plays Gunther, and he's also, and this is kind of why I wanted to set it up this way, the segue into your film, your brand new horror thriller film that looks insane, if you want my personal opinion. I can't tell you how many times I've watched the trailer before this interview, us sitting down talking, that comes out August 8th, called Among Us. He plays the dad in that movie, right? Right. And it's a transformation. It's funny. There's a running joke. So basically, I've worked with him in 3 feature films now. In the first one, he had a broken heart. His girlfriend dumped him, so he's just like this mopey guy. So when Sherman sung the second film I worked with him, I gave him a limp, like he had a bum knee, And now in this film, he's paralyzed from the waist down from a car accident. So like, that.
What's next, man? Like he's just gonna be this floating head, like Futurama in my next one, just this head in a glass jar.
So talk to me about Among Us. This is kind of why, when you and I met in Belize, we were talking about movies and getting to know one another, and you mentioned this, and I was like, oh man, I got a podcast. I'd love to have you on, help promote the film. So talk to us about Among Us.
It's a horror thriller, like you said, but the funny thing is, how kind of studios like to market more horror thriller aspects of the film, but it's actually very character driven, because I'm a huge fan of the 70s era of filmmaking, and where a lot of things are very, very like a slow burn, character driven study of stuff. And this happens to be a backdrop of a haunting, of a ghost story type of film. However, it's really about this struggling married couple who have gone through this tragedy of, in the very beginning of the movie, they get into a car accident and they're running away from a house where they've just left their son behind. So you jump right into the action, because for me, in making a horror movie, I always wanted to address certain questions that audiences have right away, like if the house is haunted, why don't they just leave? So in the first minute of the movie, that's what they're doing. They're leaving this haunted house, and they get into this car accident, as the trailer shows, and then from there we pick up the story of them trying to move on past all this tragedy, dealing with each other, and still dealing with the spirit that's kind of following them around. And that's the heart of it, is this married family trying to move past this heartbreak and tragedy and whatnot.
There's a great line in the trailer that really shows me what you were talking about, of liking the old movies from the 70s and 80s, where you have Mark's character, they go to a diner, and he kind of calls out this waitress going, hey, you were on this ghost hunter show, and she comes and he's like, no digital? And she kind of looks at him and goes, digital gives you the possibility this, and she pulls out all like these old analog 1970s tools, like EMP readers and all these like old tools, and she's like, this gives you the maybes. And I found that absolutely hysterical, especially with what I do for a living, being all digital, going back to like an analog style, was just very clever to me.
Awesome. Thanks, man. It was fun, too, actually getting all those props, because I went on eBay and I was trying to find the cheapest version of like something like visually cool, but like, because it's vintage, sometimes the people are charging like, an arm and a leg for it. And I was like, I don't need mine to work. It has to move, but I don't care if it fucking actually records. I just have it to, it's like cinematically, it has to look like it works. So I was trying to find like the cheapest thing. It was funny finding the right balance of that.
So during our email correspondence after we both got back from vacation, we started trying to line up our schedules so we could sit down. You sent me a picture, and I love the range of movies that you said to me that you kind of watched during the writing process when you were coming up with Among Us, and it was like, you know, Kubrick with Eyes Wide Shut, and the Liam Neeson wolf kind of thriller The Grey, and then, you know, of course, Insidious and The Descent, and then, you know, a movie that after watching the trailer I really got the feel of was The Exorcist, you know, the original Exorcist, that to this day still gives me heart failure when I watch it. You know, talk about a movie that holds up. What gave you the inspiration to go from a fun, kind of whimsical musical to this tragic horror thriller, you know, character development movie?
I think there are two main factors. One is, I have like a bunch of projects kind of bubbling, like there's a few that I want to do, but then some factor comes into play that makes one rise to the surface. And Mark DiConzo was the catalyst again, where this time while we were filming Sherman song, he mentioned, my parents have a connection to a lake house. It's pretty isolated in Maine, and he's from the state of Maine. And so I said, that's great. If we can get that for really cheap, I want to do a ghost story next. I want to explore something dark, something scary. I want to scare audiences. I don't think I've really had the opportunity to really flex that muscle. And one thing that I really wanted to explore is, again, how I talked about films that fall into cliche, and from the 70s and 80s, what I like that are a little bit more open-ended and kind of, I would say, even art house, even though they were studio films, but the 70s were very more experimental and bold and daring. And so I wanted to do a story that, if it was a haunted house, I always thought in my head that in real life, if Dan, you had your house was haunted, let's say, and you had someone come in to, you know, do some experiments and some tests. I mean, they would give you theories on why they think the place is haunted, but no one would know exactly 100% why. This is exactly why. And I thought films do that too much. Like, oh, you know, this was built on this, and I love Poltergeist. I'm not knocking Poltergeist, but, you know, this was built right on the cemetery. And then, you know, other films like, oh, there was witches that were hanged right outside, and now they're like, they know exactly why the place is haunted. And I always thought that was a little too forced. And so my take on the whole thing is like, well, you could have theories, and you might wonder why, but you don't know why. And it's funny because at certain festivals that it's played at, and I'm sure once it gets out there, that's partly what people either really love or really don't like, because it doesn't give you all the answers, but that's what I love.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Like, I find it, you sit through a movie for 2 hours and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's the answer. It's never like, we don't know. You know, we just know you're the unlucky SOB that is now in this house being tormented, you know? So, no, I totally see where you're coming from on that. So, Among Us is coming out on August 8th. I saw it pop up on my iTunes. I was like, oh, that's Gary's film. Cool. You know.
Awesome.
Awesome. You can also pre-order it through Amazon. And then, is it coming out on cable also?
Yes, it's coming out on all major cable providers. So I'm told it's like Cox, Verizon, Charter Spectrum, which was Time Warner a few months ago, I think. Basically, I think even Dish and, oh my God, Direct. So basically, if you have cable, just go onto your on-demand menu on August 8th, and it should be there.
Nice. No, I can't wait, man. Leela and I are going to watch it, I think, the day it comes out. I'm stoked about it. So, indie film. Talk to me, man. We talked a little bit about your background, but how did you get into this? I think my love for film from my parents showing me stuff very early on. My very first film that I ever saw was Star Wars, which I fell in love with that. And I think I never knew the magic of films there were actually people that did that as a living and as a job. And I think growing up and finding the making of Star Wars and the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark and the making of Empire, like as a kid when that came on TV and you saw people doing stuff with the cameras and the, you know, practical models and all that kind of stuff, I was like, whoa, that just blew my mind. And it kind of like, I even played
filmmaking with my brother. We had a Super 8 camera. We played, like, my friend was Harrison Ford and I was Spielberg, and I would give him direction and we would like film it and stuff. And so, we would do all that kind of stuff. But the funniest thing was I did not realize that you grew up and you actually could do it for a living. So I went to something totally different and studied psychology and went to the corporate world for a few years. But then that itch came, once it was like the Silicon Valley.com burst, the bubble burst, and it made me really, really look at what I was doing, what I really wanted to do. And that's where it really happened with the blessing of my wife. And we went from the Silicon Valley to New York to pursue it back in the mid-2000s.
Nice. And now here you are, man.
Yeah, and here I am, 6 feature films later, still hustling, living in Los Angeles now, and having a lot of fun doing it.
No, and it's very cool. All right, dude, I want to talk. The biggest thing you keep saying to me, and you said it in Belize, and we kind of had this conversation a little bit, was film. So let's run down a top 5 of your all-time favorite films, whether they're, current movies, old movies, black and white, silent, whatever they are. What is kind of your top 5 movies of all time?
Damn, man, you're putting me on the spot.
Oh, come on, Gary. I told you.
Oh gosh, you should have pre-sent the question, man. It's fun. I have like a top 5 of each genre, but man, top 5 of all time is tough. I mean, it changes every, whatever mood I'm in. But I'd have to say, like, All That Jazz or West Side Story's up there. Rear Window is up there.
Oh, that's a good movie.
Either In the Mood for Love or Chungking Express is up there. Man. God, has to be either Annie Hall or Interiors. Like, Interiors is a Woody Allen movie that's really underseen, and I think it's phenomenal.
Wasn't that one of his earlier ones?
What's that?
Wasn't that one of his earlier ones?
Yes. I actually think it came out of 2 films after. I think. Oh gosh, maybe it was after Annie Hall, but it's an awesome one. It's very Bergman-esque. I love Nashville by Robert Altman. Oh gosh, and it's just too many, Dan. It's too many. I know I'm missing like a million now because people are going to be like, he named those 5? Oh my God, now I'm not going to see his movie. He only named those 5.
There's a great movie out there, and it's one of those movies that's always tricks people, and it's History of the World Part 2 by Mel Brooks. And it's one of those movies that always makes people think that he's coming out with a sequel.
Right.
And he's always said there'll never be a sequel of that movie. But he phrased it like there would be. Any of the movies you make, have you ever thought about making a movie like a trilogy?
Yes, actually, that's funny. And I think that was, just a side note, I think History of the World was my first Mel Brooks movie that I saw as a kid because it was on HBO. And man, and I was too young to see it, and I loved it because I think there might have been, it's definitely rated R. Let's just say definitely rated R. And for a kid, you're like, oh, I get to see this. My mom's not catching me. This is great. But yeah, it's funny. I did a film called What's Up Lovely, and it was at first supposed to be kind of like a standalone, experimental, very art house film about a woman who gets laid off. It's funny, there's a kind of a running theme in some of my movies about being laid off, because in my corporate world, that's what I had to do is do a huge amount of layoffs to people, laid off over like 2,000 people in the company, which it affected me. And so What's Up Lovely is about a girl who gets fired and just kind of wanders around the streets of New York in one night. And it straddles the line between, is it a dream or not? And it's very like inspired by what happens in dreams and Alice in Wonderland and all that stuff. And I just had so much fun doing it with Jen Dees, the lead actress, who's phenomenal, that I thought that I wanted to explore this theme of loneliness, and I would do a trilogy around it. So I actually shot my second one called Bad Luck Dandelion, and that's in post, and it's very, very heavily green screen because it's a huge kind of fantastical type movie about a girl who's kind of too afraid to leave her apartment, so she has all this adventures in her mind. And I'm excited. It's going to take a while just because of all the green screen work that's going to happen with the VFX, but that's part 2, and I already have part 3 in mind as well. And it's something that's really exciting to do, and I hope to do another trilogy of something a little later on as well. But that's something I'm not sure about what it would be, except I know it's actually a fun thing to do.
What, out of everything that you do, you're a writer, you're a producer, you're a director, out of all the hats you juggle, what would you say is your favorite thing to do, and out of everything the least? Like, you have to do it because you have to do it, but it's the part of the job that you don't really care for. You'd rather be doing this.
Good question. I think most artists or most filmmakers would probably agree that producing is something they do out of necessity, not out of love. Just to get things done, you got to do it yourself because a lot of times you don't have the budget to hire a huge team. So that's something that I do with my wife. Thankfully, Susie is a tremendous producer, and sometimes I bring on some other people. But every film that I've done, I've also produced, and I've done at least a lot of the heavy lifting, and that's something I wish I did not have to do. It's not fun for me. But as far as what's fun for me, it's I love editing, actually. I love directing. Writing is the one that's the most painful, but it's also one of the most rewarding when you're done, finally. But directing is something you're not on. As a filmmaker, I don't think you get as many opportunities to actually be on set as you would like, to be able to practice and hone your craft and keep, being able to do it a lot. It's actually few and far between you're actually on set because it's so expensive. So that's something I do enjoy. I wish I could do more of. So I basically didn't answer your question because I said I enjoy everything except producing.
Well, that kind of, everything I've read, that's kind of what I've heard a lot of people say is, if I could do one thing, it'd be directing. I love writing, but, writing is what, will put me in the grave faster because of all the problems that come with it. And, you and I talked about, I've had writer's block for over 6 months, and I finally got a little kickstart when Leela and I were on vacation. So, I find it fascinating. This whole world of indie filmmaking is fascinating to me. So, the other big question I got for you is, so you're hardcore doing PR work, getting ready for the release of Among Us, coming out again on August 8th on cable, iTunes, and you can also purchase it on Amazon. What's coming up on the pipe? What's coming down the pipeline?
I am. Let's see. I'm busy doing writing, and that's what I'm doing now. Is really, really trying to create a slate of projects that can be pitched around town based on who I'm meeting, like the team of people and production companies. Depending on what they're looking for, I'll have things in my drawer that I can kind of pull out and pitch to them. So I have a sci-fi action comedy that I'm really excited about. I finished a draft of a music drama, a road trip film that's really personal but very accessible about an artist trying to make it and at the crossroads of deciding if she should give it up or not because of the lack of success. And that's something that I think is very relatable for people. And so it's fun. I'm also doing, like I said, Bad Luck Dandelion is part 2 of my loneliness trilogy that's currently being edited. So a lot of things I'm juggling and having fun with. And at the same time, I'm always interested in meeting other people because it's fun to collaborate. So it's fun to meet other writers and other producers who have scripts that they might want me to direct. So that's part of the advantage of being in Los Angeles is you get to meet a bunch of different people that are at different stages and looking for different things.
That sounds awesome, dude. You have no idea.
Well, you're welcome to come visit.
Oh yeah, man, definitely. I will definitely be doing that. Among Us comes out August 8th on Again, iTunes, the tag's already up there. You can go ahead and pre-order it. You can pre-order it on Amazon, on Blu-ray and DVD, and also check out your local cable stations, probably on pay-per-view, coming on August 8th. It's Among Us. Gary, man, you're a good friend of mine now. We made a huge connection in Belize. Thanks for taking the time, and I hope this helps with some of the PR stuff you got going on, man.
Awesome, Dan. It was a pleasure meeting you out there, and I'm really glad that we connected and we're staying in touch. And thank you for having me on, man. It was a blast. Nice and quick, easy, and fun.
Yeah, and totally painless, man. Totally painless.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Thanks a lot, Gary.
All right. Talk soon.
Daddy!
We have to go now.
My son died about a year ago. Something took his soul and left an empty shell. It's okay, I'm fine now. All of these things happen to us and follow us from home to home.
They're kicking us out already? 2 days someplace would have been a new record.
We're not moving again. I have a good feeling.
Mel.
It's worse this time.
You okay?
Are you gonna tell me where we're going?
It's a surprise. Eleanor, you were on that ghost hunting show. We're here because we have a problem.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but we all have problems.
You're an expert in the paranormal. We have the footsteps when there's no one there. Lights flickering on and off by themselves. No matter where we go, no matter what we do, it follows us everywhere. Will you help us?
Come on in.
Hello, 1970.
Digital stuff, things are either yes, you got it, or no, you didn't. This lets me catch the maybe. I captured this last night. It's pushing through.
What is?
Something big. I keep hearing one word.
What word?
These things need something to help them manipulate our world.